Hanukkah and End Times, Understanding the Great Tribulation. My name's Enoch Lavender from Olive Tree Ministries, and welcoming you to this continuation of our series on looking at end time prophecy through the lens of the events of Hanukkah and the prophecies surrounding it in the Bible. Now, when it comes to the Abomination of Desolation, Jesus spoke of it in Matthew 24, and this phrase has become the foundation for many different ideas in terms of what to expect in the end times. Jesus told us that when you see this abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, for then there'll be great tribulation. So a key starting point for this great tribulation relates to the Abomination of Desolation standing in the holy place. Now, what does this mean? What does it mean in plain English, so to speak? Well, firstly, let's have a look at many of the interpretations that are out there. Possible interpretations. Is it something that occurred during the Roman siege in AD 70 when the Romans destroyed the temple? There are many who teach this. However, there is an issue with this interpretation, because Jesus referred to the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet. And Daniel in his prophecy specifically said in verse 11-14 that this is for the last or the latter days. I don't believe that the Roman siege was the end of time in AD 70. In other words, there is something yet to come. Another possible interpretation is that it is the Dome of the Rock, which is standing on what is known as the Temple Mount, and perhaps standing on top of the holy place itself, declaring that Allah has no son, and so it is in that way an abomination. Yes, you could argue for this. However, if this was the case, if that really is the abomination of desolation, then Jesus is commanding us that when we see it, we should flee to the mountains. And basically, all of us as believers should have been living there for the past 1300 years. So, I don't believe the Dome of the Rock is the abomination of desolation. What about some kind of false worship in the church, where the church is being deceived? Now, yes, there is deception in churches. Yes, things are going on that are not right. But this would be quite a stretch from the literal meaning of the text. Daniel the prophet would not have had this in mind when he spoke of it. And Jesus' listeners would not have imagined this kind of interpretation when he spoke of it in his day. So let's go a bit more into what it could mean. You see, the events of Hanukkah, which happened about 164 BC, provide a key to understanding this key end-time prophecy of Jesus. Daniel 11:30 predicts about 400 years before the events of Hanukkah, so about 500 BC, that this Antiochus, this ruler, would return in rage against the Holy Covenant from his attack on Egypt, and he would do damage, and forces were mustered by him, and they'll defile the sanctuary, that is the temple in Jerusalem, and then they'll take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. So in the context here, we're talking about an attack on Jerusalem, an attack on the temple, a seizing of sacrifices, and this abomination of desolation. Well, Antiochus IV, he, in history, returned from his failed attack on Egypt in rage, and he attacked Jerusalem, and he stopped all sacrifices from occurring in the temple. And he went further to place an idol there, which became nicknamed Shikus Shomen, or the Abomination of Desolation. Now, why was it called this? Why abomination? Well, not only was it an idol, it was an idol of Zeus, but that idol of Zeus, they had changed the face to bear his image, so the image of Antiochus. He called himself Epiphanes, which means God made flesh. And so his image was being proclaimed as the image of God in the holy place of the temple. Not only that, he sacrificed a pig on the altar. Now, you don't get more non-kosher than that, and this is truly holy ground. This is a place dedicated to God. And he sprinkled the blood and the broth of the pig on the holy vessels of the temple in the Holy of Holies. It was an abomination, an absolute abomination. But more than that, why was it a desolation? It marked the beginning of an intense period of house-to-house persecution. From the time this idol was erected in the temple, soldiers of Antiochus went door to door, checking if people were keeping the Torah, if they were circumcising their kids. And people were being dragged to the authorities, being tortured, and many lost their lives. And so it marked the beginning of desolation. So this abomination brought desolation. And the only way to survive was to flee to the mountains of Judea, and to live in caves. And so we've got a picture here of caves in the Judean mountains, where people were quite literally hiding out during those hard days of Antiochus. Hebrews 11 seems to be referring to these days when it talks about those who were tortured, not accepting deliverance. So they didn't accept to be set free on the condition of eating pork or eating meat sacrificed to an idol. They did not receive that deliverance in order that they might obtain a better resurrection. In other words, they believed in life after death. They believed in serving God, and they did not want to defile themselves and commit themselves to this idol of Antiochus. It says that they wandered in the deserts, they wandered in the mountains, in dens and caves of the earth. And that is exactly what was happening to the faithful few during these dark days of Antiochus. And the writer of Hebrews says, of whom the world was not worthy. These were heroes of the faith, who were faithful in a difficult time. They are an inspiration to us, and we'll talk more about them in future episodes. It's coming again. You see, Jesus, when he then goes on to describe, saying that you will see this abomination of desolation, he is drawing on what has already happened. He is drawing on the collective memory of Israel and basically saying that you are going to see this. And as he's saying that, it will immediately bring a mental picture to mind in terms of what it will be. It will be an idol standing in the temple. It will mark the beginning of persecution and a time to flee. And that's exactly what he goes on to say, that those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, for then there will be great tribulation, great persecution, great distress. The time of persecution during Hanukkah was one of the worst in Israel's history. And Jesus was warning his listeners that this time will come again, and it will be, in a sense, a mirror image of what happened back then. It will be a fulfillment of what Daniel said would happen in the latter days. So, if today you spoke to a Jewish person and you said the Holocaust is coming back, immediately that would bring a mental image of all the things involved in the Holocaust. And in the same way, when Jesus spoke of the abomination of desolation, this brought a very clear mental image to his listeners. And we can draw out of this that there, in other words, will be, in the end times, there will be a third temple. The temple will be rebuilt. It must be rebuilt if this is going to happen as spoken by Daniel, as spoken by Jesus himself. It will be defiled by an idol. But key phrase, defiled. In other words, it has to be genuinely holy in the first place in order for it to actually be able to be defiled. So there's coming a temple which in God's sight will be holy ground. Doesn't mean that its rulers and leadership were doing everything that is right in God's sight. Yet this place is called by his name, this place is chosen by him, and this is why Satan himself wants to position himself there and receive the worship of mankind. So it's going to be defiled by an idol, and that idol being erected in the holy place will signal the beginning of a time of intense persecution. Now, if you're interested in more on this, we will be continuing our teaching series on Hanukkah. We'll go into more details, but I also want to show you a video from my recent book on the Third Temple. So our upcoming episodes will be on the Great Tribulation, on sacrificial food, on the end time heroes, and on hope for a defiled temple. So for those of you who've been sticking with me to the end of this video, I want to show you a preview of my book on the temple and why I believe there will be a third temple. I encourage you to get hold of this book, and it's available in bookstores near you. Let's play the video.
One of the most intriguing and controversial signs of the end times is the modern-day movement to rebuild Israel's temple. Yet despite it being the center of the final end-time conflict, many Christians struggle to understand the significance of this prophetic movement. This book, Rebuilding the Temple, by author Enoch Lavender, features an easy-to-read overview of the current developments, including the ongoing work to restore the temple vessels, the use of DNA technology to identify priests, the challenging topic of the Abomination of Desolation, the surprising potential role of Islam, what the building of the temple will mean for both Christians and Jews. Rebuilding the Temple is a book to help everyday believers to better understand the Third Temple movement and to better prepare themselves for Jesus' soon return. Get your copy now on Amazon.com and all good bookstores.
So I'd encourage you to get a hold of this book and to let us know any questions you may have on this topic. You can find it and find out more by going to olivetreeministries.tv. You can order it from our YouTube store itself, or you can do a search on Amazon or on Google for Enoch Lavender, Rebuilding the Temple. May the Lord bless you, and thank you for listening, and we'll continue our series on Hanukkah and end time prophecy in the coming days.